Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. This episode has been made possible with the support of the Screen Ireland Stakeholders Fund, and today we are delighted to be once again chatting with John Butler. Director, screenwriter, novelist John has helmed some really wonderful features, The Stag, Handsome Devil and Poppy Chulo, and he was recently our writer and second director on Stephen Merchant's The Outlaws for BBC One and Amazon Studios. So now, the first two episodes of John's own series, These Sacred Vows, is available to watch on the RTÉ Player, with episode 3 airing at 9:30 on RTÉ One this Sunday. Son, sex, murder, Catholicism and betrayal, so it's a perfectly Irish mix. So have a listen to the trailer here.
You're here for the wedding?
Hola, Padre. You lost your way.
By all accounts, I'm staying here.
I was wondering when and where it might be best for me to meet the bride and groom.
Oh. They're not religious. The thing should be more big bang bosh.
Hiya, Father.
But this lot, this is their holiday, and I don't think they'll be happy to kind of curtail their behavior just because they're sharing with a priest.
Is it interesting?
You can do some, Sandra, but you have to promise you won't die.
Cuerpo de Cristo.
Whoa. Is that the priest? Is he wearing any factor?
Your friend group is drug addicted, alcoholic, death wish people.
I'm trying so hard to be a good person.
Important to keep a secret every now and then.
People love a promise. Those promises are hard to keep.
So thank you so much for chatting with us.
You're welcome.
God, it's such an exciting show. But I was wondering, before we get there, if we can go through just your career and your creative experience first. You studied English, Greek and Roman in school?
Classics, yeah, like English and Greek and Roman in college.
In college and in UCD. And did you go, you did the Masters then in film studies. Is that something you went back and did later, or was that straight after your studies?
No, I did it the following year, and I think it was the second year. I think it was either the first or second year of that Masters. So it was kind of a new thing. The Department of Film in UCD had just been set up. So I'd finished my arts degree and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I love film, and it was kind of the golden age of like multiplex cinema and, American independent cinema. So I was going to the cinema all the time. And also the Dublin Film Festival was really flying then. It was such a great program. And we had like independent art house cinemas. We had the Lighthouse, which was on Middle Abbey Street then. So I would go to the cinema all the time. And then when this Masters came up, it was like a great opportunity to just keep doing what I love doing in my spare time. And it also had an element of academic, value to it. But it really was just like, I haven't a clue how to do what I want to do, which is make TV and films. So I'm just going to do this for a year. And it was great.
And at that point, did you see yourself as a writer? Did you always want that hands-on experience then? Had you any like light experiences growing up in terms of like even creation or art in different forms?
No, I was always just writing bits and bobs, and I never really had a sense of how that might come to fruition. But I used to always think to myself, or if people ever asked me what do you want to do or what would be ideal for you when you're older, and it was always to me just getting paid for writing. Like that was always and by extension getting paid for writing stories. I was interested in fiction. Like growing up, I never really read anything historical or fact-based, or I was never a fan particularly of documentaries. So I was always into fiction and writing fiction, and I never knew what to do about that. And it started to coalesce during this year of doing the Masters. And then when I graduated from that, I moved to San Francisco and got a job in a TV company. And that was the point where I really started to go, okay, I need to kind of plot my way through this. So I started making segments for a magazine television show in San Francisco. And then I realized after 4 years there that the best chance for a young Irish person to get money to tell stories on screen was to apply to the film board, because they had a shortcuts film scheme. So I kind of moved back to Ireland and got a job making TV promos, but also started to write short films and move more specifically in the direction of telling those stories on screen.
And was that when you were working on George? Did you get that immediately, or did it take a little bit of time to?
No, I think it took 4 years after I got home, because I got back I was working in TV promos in TV3, which is now Virgin Media, and then in RTÉ as well for a while. And then I went freelance and then started to make shorts. So I made George, I co-directed that with a friend called Roy Bresnan. And then Hugh O'Connor and I co-wrote a short called Spaceman 3, which he directed. And then I directed a short that Kevin Barry wrote called The Ballad of Kid Canturk. And I did those in successive years, I think roughly. And I was also writing sketches with two friends of mine, Ben Kelly and Owen Williams, that became Your Bad Self. So I was noodling with things and getting a little bit closer towards doing what I wanted to do. But as you can tell from all of that, and I had a weekly column in the Irish Times around then too. So it was all just like writing stories, point of view, but the clarity hadn't emerged as to how exactly to continue going. It looks in retrospect like there was a plan, but I was really just doing whatever I could.
That's interesting because I think as well there's your your tone and the types of stories that you tell, they do vary very strongly. So you'd, have something that's a light comedy, you'd have something that's quite heartfelt, and then that tips over into the darkness. And then do you have like at this time, are you forming your voice? Do you have like a spectrum of something that you would define as your writing tone?
Well, I think all those things that you mentioned are all contained within one singular tone, which is comedy drama, which has always been my voice. So like the things you mentioned, like serious things or like lighter things, I think those can all be overlaid with a singular tonal expression, which is my voice as a comedy drama person. I don't think I've ever made anything that could be considered like quote unquote pure drama. I've probably made pure comedy because I wrote Your Bad Self with other people. So, I mean, those are pure comedy, I suppose. But I think there's darkness in even the sketches that I would have written on, and even the ones I directed that were written by other people, that feel like they were always playing with elements of seriousness and elements of comedy at the same time. I love that.
And do you think your time in San Francisco, away from Irish society, away from how we were, and so that was in the 90s, and then moving back to a country that at the time was so conservative, do you think that sort of shaped as well, that darkness?
Yeah, I wasn't. Homosexuality was decriminalized when I was 22 and had already emigrated. So it was like, if you were being dramatic, you could say it was illegal to be me for my entire life up until then. So, and I didn't really feel authentically Irish until marriage equality passed. So this is all the psychology that's mine to unpick and to kind of write out in story terms. And I think you're dead right. There's a worldview that kind of goes based on that the rules are mad and they don't make sense, and that I don't necessarily have any respect for established ideas that are being given to me as a person growing up in that country, in that place and time. And so I think I think you're dead right. I think that informs a kind of slightly askance way of looking at the world, and a slight kind of rejection of things that are supposed to be considered serious, because when you grow up in a time and place that just invalidates you, you don't really have any other opportunity other than to kick back however you can. So as a writer, also my obsession with telling the truth and becoming true and clear about myself was obviously very clearly linked to that journey too. So yeah, those are the elements that go into creating a voice, I think.
The types of stories that you're telling and the characters that you use to explore them, like before we get into this incredible series, I just want to learn more about what your process was and how it was developing. Like you seem always to be very collaborative, creative, and what's lovely as well is, like, going back to George, there's creative partnerships that have lasted until that are still there in your work. Does your process change when you're developing an idea? How do the ideas come to you? Like, is it like you sit down, you have a routine, you do it? Is it deadline based?
My obsession is with kind of the expression of the self and of your own. And this doesn't need to be literal, but like your point of view, your voice is your most valuable asset. So when you collaborate with people, you go on a journey where an element of that is expressed, and that's fantastic. And I think film and television are very collaborative mediums, even if you're the only writer. So that element of collaboration has always been really fruitful for me. I love actors, and I love collaborating with actors. I love improvisation when it's good, and I love, yeah, working on things with other people. I've been in writers' rooms. I've co-written scripts, and I enjoy that a lot. But I have to say as well, as my career has progressed, some of the dependencies that I felt in that regard, in terms of needing a collaborator at the outset of an idea, like the bouncing of ideas, that kind of a sense has diminished a little bit within me, and I'm kind of, I suppose, a little more certain about what I'm looking for. I mightn't have the ability to say it directly at the beginning of the process, but I know that there's something out there that I'm going for, and sometimes it feels like, well, this is my journey to make. And that's kind of, there's an element of exposure to that, but I don't care about that anymore. It feels good to do that because it feels like you're traveling in the right direction. Whereas maybe when I was younger, I think there was a comfort in the support that you get from collaboration that was helpful at the time, and really fruitful too. But I think now I'm happy enough as a writer in my own right. Although, as recently as 3 years ago, I was collaborating with Stephen Merchant. So it's not like I don't have any hard and fast rules there, but it's good to switch it up.
Brilliant. And like, that's very interesting. And I don't even want to get to that part of your career yet, because I love this phase where you're kind of like developing your skills and your voice. But what's interesting then, and when you're talking about that collaborative nature, is that in 2011 you published a novel, which is very not a collaborative thing. I suppose at the point where you get the editor in, but was that something that was sort of in you wanting to come out? Was that something that was always on your kind of back burner as you're making short films?
Well, that's a weirdly collaborative experience as well, in the sense that I wrote a piece of memoir for the Dublin Review, about my time in San Francisco. And that came to the attention of Paul Baggy, who was the publisher of Picador at the time. And he asked me whether I'd be interested in fictionalizing it as a novel. And I, obviously I've been writing fiction anyway. So that the job then became of writing that as a created kind of fictional iteration. And that's a collaboration. Chris Doyle and Paul Bagley at Picador helped me along the road with that, and that was published by them. So that was kind of another form of it. Collaboration is interesting because the most fruitful collaborative partners I have now are Rob Walpole and Rebecca O'Flanagan at Treasure. So I think collaboration, as distinct from co-writing, is the thing that has sustained me through the later part of my career. So with the book, it was collaborating with the publisher that was the most kind of nourishing relationship in that period too. So you can never escape it entirely. I mean, everybody is leaning on other people at all points in the creative process.
Actually, that's kind of lovely, because I think the first time I saw your work did Poppy Chili premiere in Diff? Because I do remember yeah, that's where it was.
It didn't premiere.
Or didn't, yeah. So that was the first time I saw it, and it was something that I think at that point was like, I had never seen an Irish film that was like that, and that told something from that perspective. And at the time, I think your time in the States as well is very interesting. I was wondering if you can talk to me now about your journey from shorts to film. Like, okay, so Your Bad Self was
2011, I think.
2011, and that was the IFTA. So that would have been a very big move. Did you, at the time, were you kind of constantly working on longer form projects? Did, like that validation and something that really kind of reached so many people give you the confidence, or did it open a door to do it?
Well, no, because it didn't get recommissioned. So, I mean, that was the first kind of thing that really was, that was a kind of a clear sense of needing to have more than one plate spinning. And at the time I was signed to ICM in LA, and I was kind of like starting to go, well, that side of things in terms of telling a feature film story was the thing that really started to interest me more than anything. And I'd written a couple of feature length screenplays by that point, and one of which got me signed there. So I started to work and put all my attention in that direction. And I also realized with my experience of having made short films that they're not exactly my métier. Like, I loved making them, but I wouldn't describe myself as a brilliant short filmmaker, because I think
your characters are so strong and they're so defined and they're so true that there's no space for them in shorts.
well, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I think I heard somebody make the analogy between a poem and a novel, with a short film and a feature, and there might be some truth in that. I see short films and I'm in awe at the how perfect they are. I mean, Johnny Kelly's short, Retirement Plan, which is nominated for the Oscar at the moment. There's an example of a film, of a story that has reached its fullest expression in that form. And I never felt I was able to do that. I enjoyed my time making them, but I don't think that way. So I can see a film like Johnny's and kind of recognize its perfection, or the perfection of its expression in that form, but it was never me. But the things that you do learn by making short films are things that you bring with you to the feature film environment, like the obvious things about where the camera goes, what lens goes on it, how to block and rehearse and shoot, and all the practical stuff. But yeah, it wasn't my métier.
So sketch comedy is a very different type of thing. Did you feel that helped you learn and grow and give you space to do something different, or was it a tool to kind of, again, just get your writing and your observations and your thoughts out there?
Yeah, I loved it, and I still love sketch comedy, and I would have done loads more of it if the opportunity had presented itself. Ben and Owen and I used to just meet up once or twice a week and write together, for fun, So, and I always loved that experience of writing sketches. But it's, in retrospect, you can kind of see how maybe some of the constraints of that form I was beginning to bridle at, and wanting to tell my own stories. So, the progression, I think, is clear when you look back. But I think I was always moving towards the opportunity to tell the bigger stories with more character, as you say, more development of character within a single storyline.
And so, this again was the early 2000s, sort of as you were coming to fruition. And like, now you've come so far, like so far in your career. Were there any beats that you looked back and like either like mistakes that you made or issues that were overcome? I would also say as well, like even in the early 2000s, post-recession Ireland, like there was a slight lack of opportunity and funding, and there was also it still was much more conservative. Like we think that we were so liberal and things like that, but there was when you actually go back and look at texts and look at news articles, it was very much so that horrible Catholic ideology was like still had its claws in us.
Yeah, completely. And I think my interest, which was as a gay writer and director of film and television in Ireland, I always wanted to tell stories in the mainstream, and I always wanted to represent gay and queer characters. And those two things, I always felt very strongly, shouldn't be opposed to each other. But the truth is that it was hard, and I think maybe continues to be hard. But when I got to make a film like Handsome Devil, or had gay characters in the Stag, it felt at the time like there was a boldness to that. And in retrospect, you kind of look back and go, well, I wonder why that was considered bold at that point in time, because it's something that I don't know. Maybe there's a world where you can get to tell more of those stories, even leaving aside the kind of economics of it. I think I'm lucky to have had the opportunity to tell the stories I've had. But yeah, I think there were periods in that moment in Irish film history that you mentioned where it was tricky. Yeah, absolutely.
And were there stories in there that you were sort of disappointed that they weren't, the ones that got away, that got to a certain point, but then never made it any further?
I think it's really hard for someone like me to kind of talk in those terms, because I've been really fortunate. Like I made three films on the bounce that were funded by Screen Ireland, with the Stag, Handsome Devil and Papachulo, like in 6 years. So I did well. Now listen, I know that the success of each one allowed me to make the next one, But the truth remains that you don't have any God-given right to the funding. You know, you can attach cast that will make the argument economically, and you can write about your country in a way that makes the public service argument. But I think, and I believe myself as well, that you do need to also make an economic argument. You know, your films have to earn their corn in the marketplace, because feature film is a commercially driven enterprise. So I don't think I could bitch and moan about the things that didn't get over the line. And also I've been fortunate, like I say, to have really supportive production partners with Rob and Rebecca, but also I always am writing more than one thing, but out of necessity, you know, but also because that's how my mind works. And also I have two hands, so.
So the Stag, so that was your first feature film. From doing sketch comedy, was it just like a very, very natural progression and there was no challenges there? Or was there a bit of a culture shock from going from shorts to this?
No, there wasn't any culture shock. I mean, I was ready to make that film. I'd been directing commercials. I'd made a documentary. I'd done a TV series for RTÉ, and all those shorts. So I was ready to go. The biggest problem is with comedy, you hear about execution dependent, which is that you can't tell if the script is going to work until you see it. So there's a leap of faith for people. Something is either funny or it isn't. So myself and Peter MacDonald, who wrote it with me, we were aware that as a first-time director, for me, it's always hard to get people to back you, even if the script reads really well, and it did. So there was no. I would say wasn't much of a practical learning curve, but in terms of how the business works, there was a little bit of that that had to be overcome. But I was ready to make a feature by then, and the script was written with that in mind. It was very much a question of, okay, I want to make a film that is a commercial proposition, that has something to say about modern Irish masculinity, and also something that is funny. And I thought I was best placed to do that. So away I went.
And then in terms of Papichuli, so that's like such a different type of like a type of story and types of characters. Can you even tell me about like where that story came from and what the intent was? And was it difficult? Like, did you have to sort of prove your chops to say like, yeah, I'm the person to tell this story in this place?
Well, Papichulo was different in the sense that it was born out of my own personal experience, being kind of adrift in Los Angeles and trying to figure out how to be happy in that place in time. So it was a story about queer loneliness, and the kind of what I felt was a specific strain that is unique to queer people. And at that time, I really thought that there was something interesting to talk about there, particularly in relation to what our perceived notions of attractiveness and handsomeness are, and also about outsiders in a specific place. I really wanted to make a comedy about loneliness, and that's a difficult one to get made. You know, it's kind of an interesting idea that looks on the surface like a conventional buddy movie, but is pushing around ideas that are a little more melancholy and have a kind of undertow of sadness. So as ever along the comedy drama spectrum, it's one of those stories that I like telling, where you're kind of playing with happy and sad at the same time.
Like, and it's such an international story, but it's such a sort of like authentic, emotional one that resonates so well. Like, was that the one then that maybe got you noticed more stateside? Like, when did your career start to take off there, and in terms of being in writers' rooms and, you know, like getting that other type of work?
I think it was probably Handsome Devil and Papichulo, which were made in quick succession. So Handsome Devil sold worldwide to Netflix after Toronto. So that was the one that kind of literally around the world made the noise. And then Papichulo did well too, because it premiered in Toronto and went around the world also. So those two in conjunction, I think. On the bait, Stephen Merchant, I think, saw Papichulo, and so that's how I went into the writers' room of the Outlaws. That was the first writers' room that I went into, and I went into it thinking this. I really wanted to obviously work with him, but also I really wanted to have experience of what a writers' room was like, partly with a view to maybe someday running my own one, but also I just wanted to sit in a room with funny, interesting people and throw around story ideas. But I thought I would be doing it for a week. And then 3.5 years and 3 seasons later, and a global pandemic, I kind of emerged blinking into the world going, what was that?
And directing as well on a show of that scope. Like
Yeah.
something I don't know what the budgets are for things. But like something with that scope, is it easier with that level of resources, or does it pose its own challenges technically, or like I suppose Stephen is the main director, so are you kind of going into something that he's already set up, and because you're so creatively intertwined, it's a more natural fit?
Yeah, it's weird because the writer's room experience, like having done that and then written an episode, um, and building that relationship with Stephen probably gave him the opportunity to go, all right, well, would you consider directing block two? So that element of trust and rapport was probably built in the writer's room. And then in terms of the budget, I mean, there was bigger things than I'd contended with before. Like we built a lot of standing sets, which I hadn't really got a huge amount of experience with before, and we were shooting 2 cameras, and the budget was massive, relatively. I mean, compared to the stuff that I'd worked with before. But it's funny, you can become overawed by that. I remember when the first day I did a commercial, I remember arriving on set and seeing the catering bus and looking at it and going like, oh shit, that's because of me, and feeling like freaking out inside about that. But that was the only time that I was kind of overwhelmed, and that was way before this. So when I got onto the set on The Outlaws, at the end of the day, everything boils down to what's in the monitor, and everything boils down to the tone. Is the tone there? Is the tone consistent? Is it doing the right thing? So you just develop this kind of laser focus on what's in the monitor, and all the other apparatus and all the other bells and whistles and the golf buggies going by and the hundreds of people that you don't know, all of those things fade away. It's just about the story, and there's a kind of really great intensity that you feel when you do that. It's like a flow state where everything else goes away and you just become obsessively interested in what's in the monitor. It was a great experience. I mean, it was tough, but it was really enjoyable.
Wow. And then actually, I kind of skipped over Handsome Devil, but it's so important, I think, because it is such a personal story to you and your upbringing. But then, it is, I think stories like that and that emotional honesty is so important, for that next generation as things happen in the world and we slip back into conservatism. It's like the warning tale and something so true. Like, for you, because it is so personal, does that change your relationship to the film?
No, because everything I've written has been that personal. If you're not freaking out and feeling horribly exposed as a writer, I don't know if you're doing it right. Like I kind of weirdly relish that. After growing up, feeling like I had to hide a very significant part of my identity, when you resolve that or go on the journey towards resolving that, you become addicted to the opposite sensation, which is of exposure. And everything that I write about hasn't happened to me. It's fiction, but the emotional truth of it is right at the center. And I have become obsessively interested in accessing that emotional interior in everything that I've done. So Handsome Devil was really gratifying. I love the experience of making it. And at the time, I didn't realize how. I mean, there's a message in there about resisting binary definition that gained a huge amount of relevance in that moment in our history, because this whole discourse around trans identity was becoming really amplified in the culture. But all sorts of binary definitions, became were of interest to me, and then boiling them down to the story of two boys in school was really joyful. So.
If you are bringing so much of your personal self to your work, do you find then that does it take an emotional toll, or is it very cathartic, or is it both at different times?
It's I mean, it's gratifying when it's received well in the world, but there's a stage before that that's even more significant, which is when you look at it when it's done and you go, well, I can't tell it. I wouldn't say any better, but I wouldn't choose to tell it any differently. And that's the thing that inures you from any critical response that may not be totally positive. And listen, with everything I've done, you get good and bad there. But you have to sit in the moment when the film or the TV show is done and just before it comes out into the world, and you have to honestly interrogate it and go, that is what I wanted to do. And if I had the opportunity to do it again, I would do it like that. And that moment is yours. And if you're honest with yourself about it, that will sustain you no matter what happens afterwards. The thing isn't done when it's finished. It's done when it's seen, of course, but your relationship to it is preserved in that moment before it goes out into the world.
That beat, so that the difference between like sharing a film with audiences and then doing something from broadcast, like, okay, so like working on someone else's, I would say someone else's, like I'm sure you've so much invested in it, but you know, like it is someone else's project, but then like it goes out, like are you guys kind of celebrating together as it goes out into the world? Is there this moment of you just wait and see? But like, I mean, like a film is very much so like you watch it in an audience with a big group of people, like there's a big moment of note and you feel it immediately. Like, were there any moments like throughout the massive kind of your career where, you know, those were particularly significant to you?
All the premieres are great. You know, the Toronto premiere of Papi Chulo was fantastic, and you know, other premieres have been wonderful. And you know, we screened The Outlaws in Bristol, and that was a great night as well. You know, a moment of great recognition of their city by the people of Bristol, and their favorite son being there in Steve, and so all those moments, you have a kind of a mental scrapbook of positive reception that is really enjoyable to revisit. But I'm a person who's most gratified by the work itself, you know, about the idea of expressing oneself. I really am. I mean, it's not like it gives you this coat of armor, because obviously you care and it matters to your ongoing career how things are received. But if you're a writer, you're getting to say something. You're getting to probably not resolve, but exteriorize and put on display aspects of your psychology, and that's its own reward. You know, it's kind of fantastic. It's a privilege to be funded to do it. And it's also great to get the opportunity, as I'm doing now, to write about your people and to have that go into their living rooms. So I think there's kind of, the gratification has to come from internal sources. You know, you have to find a way to love your relationship to the work and respond to the challenges, you know, that are based on you.
Or that moment where it is in your mind and it's there in your mind and it's memory, but then you have like a caliber of cast that across all the projects they're like, I was even thinking of Lola Pettigrew and I was like, oh my God, she's amazing.
Yeah, I have a memory of being on a low loader in Los Angeles, in Atwater Village, and it was magic hour, driving around and filming Matt Bomer and Alejandro in Papi Chulo, and I took the I had a black blanket over my head, and I briefly just took it off to see where I was, and I looked over, and we were passing the apartment building where 4 years before I had been living when I had the idea for the film that I was now making. So you get those little moments in your career where you're just like, wow, like, and that has nothing to do with critical response or awards or movie stars. It's about expression of self. It's about the progress of a life and a voice. And that is more significant to me. That has the greatest value in the world, you know?
Now for These Sacred Vows. When I first watched the 3 episodes and I was like, oh, this White Lotus, like it was the first thing, it was the first comp that went into my head, and I was like, oh, White Lotus, and I was like, yeah, it'd be great to see an Irish White Lotus, and I was like, and I got married in Tenerife, and it's such a beautiful space, and I was in that hotel doing a tour of the venues for the wedding venue, and you know, like there's something funny that happens in that space, and I was like, oh yeah, that's it. But it was like, it is not that even remotely. I think it is so distinctly dark and funny, and you know, there's flavors of Irish relationship, that historical relationship to religion. Because I'm also, you're the protagonist is a priest. How does that work? And you know, that notion of identity and these surface levels of how they play out, but really like what's underneath everything in it is so much deeper. And you know, there's essences of class, of wealth, of identity, and like such darkness. So it's like when you actually watch it, it's I would say much better and much darker than and I do like, I love White Lotus. It's brilliant, but it is not in any way like that. It's so much richer and identifies with that. So tell me about These Sacred Vows, because it's fascinating.
Well, every TV show or film has to come into the world wearing clothes of some sort. You have to. And then it's what happens after you arrive that is the basis of your story. So These Sacred Vows comes into the world bearing the clothes of a procedural. There is a body in the pool. It is set in the sunshine. So that is superficially similar to The White Lotus. And I get that. And I'm honored because that's a brilliant show. It's what happens after that setup that defines the show's DNA. And it's where it goes. It's the road it travels afterwards that makes it its own thing. I remember with Handsome Devil, people were like, this is just a high school film. And of course it is. It comes into the world wearing those clothes. That's what happens. And then it's the story you tell after that. So with These Sacred Vows, it's a body in the pool, and then the priest who is dead jumps us back 1 week before and takes us into the resort on the week of a wedding that he is due to officiate. And then every week subsequently switches point of view to another character at the wedding. You never meet the bride and groom because happiness writes white, and who cares about them? It's a story of everybody else that's at the wedding. And it culminates on the day of the wedding itself, when we end the subjective point of view and tell that story from everyone's POV on the last day.
God, and fabulous. And I think what's wonderful is how when you delve into the depth of each character, that you know, the periphery stories are still playing out, that and everything is just so rich and interwoven. So like, I mean, it's one of the things that, like, you know, doesn't, like, you were like, I use my own emotions, but and as to do it, but it just feels so true. The characters, the relationships, how they're observed, and there's such a sort of wealth of them. But where did that original concept come from?
I've been to so many weddings, and some of them have been great, and some of them have been absolutely rubbish. And but they've all been interesting, and I've always been conscious when I've been at them that people experience weddings very differently, and that there is a sense of an audit in your life when you're sitting in the pew at a church and there's a couple enacting a romantic fantasy on the altar. You are forced to reflect on your life, where you are in your own romantic life, but also where you are in your life generally, because it's a marking of time, you know. So I love the idea of telling a story from the points of view of somebody at the singles table, and the way that might feel in the context of somebody else's happy day. The mother of the bride, a French exchange student who's visiting an Irish family and getting to see the specific weirdness of an Irish wedding. And then the priest as well, who's obviously, if not reviled, treated with great indifference, and what's their utility in the world. So it's just a really fun place. It's a unifying spectacle that puts all these people of different generations together and raises the temperature on them. I'm always fascinated by that, by all the generations mingling in one space and having to face each other and, you know, look at each other and compare themselves to each other.
How long did the script take to develop? How long did it take to kind of really marinate all these characters in this way? Because it just feels very solidified.
But I had the idea probably 7 or 8 years ago and wrote about 10 pages of an outline and put it away. And then I'm not very good on timelines, but I think 2 years ago, I mentioned it to Rob and Rebecca at Treasure, and they brought it to RTÉ, and there was an interest immediately. And I wrote the first 2 episodes, and then when it was commissioned, there was 2 episodes and a big outline, and then wrote up the series. I had a small writer's room to generate story for the last 4 episodes, and then the following year we went into production, and now here we are. So it was. I suppose in TV terms that sounds quick, in the sense that it, you know, very roughly speaking, you could say a year to write, a year to shoot, and now year 3 it's on air. But it was germinating for a long time before then.
The Outlaws, right? So that was 4 years ago, and this was something that was there. Like, was that a very lucky coincidence that you got to be, like, through the writer's room on the set for like a project of that scale, in terms of like proof that you have the chops to do this? Or like, to, you know, like externally to raise funding can be quite difficult, and to say like, look, I have done it before in this space and now I'm ready to do it by myself. This is all I've achieved. Or, you know, would you have done it anyway?
I don't know. That's a question for somebody else. I mean, it undoubtedly helped because it's just experience, you know. And I took so much of the learnings of filming that show onto this one. And I think from the outside looking in, if you're commissioning or funding, it probably is good to go, well, this guy was writer and director and exec producer on this big show for Amazon and BBC, so he's got the ability to do it. that's probably very true. And I think as well, just managing all that cast, and you learn so much on every job that then transposes to the next. The interesting thing though is every first day on the set, I don't know, and I was speaking to a director friend about this. Every first day on the set of the new production, there is a moment where you go, I can't remember how to direct. It's always the first scene. It's one setup, and you kind of all cut, and you're standing behind the monitor, and you're looking at the actors. They're waiting for some form of interaction, and you're just like, I don't remember how to be a director. And then you do remember, and your muscle memory kicks in, and you give a note, and you change things around, and away you go. But it just shows you learn, you experience everything, and then because I don't at least go from one directly to the other. There's always a writing period. Part of me has to remember, I guess the word is remember how it happens. It's muscle memory. But then once you get up and running, it's just like, it's like swimming, it's meditative. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, there's a kind of flow state to directing when you're doing it for a long time. The outlaws was 215 days of shooting, and yeah, and I mean, even These Sacred Vows, which was less, was like, I think 12 or 13 weeks. So you get into it by week two, you're just like fully in a groove. And I had a James Mather who filmed it, and Jared Duffy, who was the first AD. Like, that little troika of people, that relationship between those three people is always so important. First AD, DP, and director, and I love them both, and they were fantastic. So,
and a cast of that caliber as well, like they're all so experienced and have such a kind of strong background themselves. I wonder, is there an element of like, once the camera's on, like they can bring that. Do you as well, in terms of shooting so far away? So I know you guys were on location in that incredible venue, the Carlton. So I've been there and I've seen it. I was like, it's amazing. I know about the golf carts and the 2-star Michelin restaurant. It's amazing. Did like that? I mean, that's the thing. You don't have what is it? A kind of, are there many film depots around the corner in the Canary Islands where you can run and pick up a light? Like, is it something you really have to prepare for shooting over there? Like, I actually know a lot of huge big productions have shot there, but as someone who got married over there, I also know like there's an island lifestyle and everyone is very laid back.
Yeah, but it's a working island. There's a big tax break for filming in the Canary Islands, and there's a lot of shooting going on there. There was a Guy Ritchie series before us. There's always things after us. So there's a good skilled workforce and great facilities there. We were only at that hotel for 2 days. The rest of it was all around the island. So
Brilliant.
yeah, so and it reminded me a little bit of Dublin back in the day before we became all savvy about filming, because they were so welcoming, and we were able to access a lot of very unspoiled, very local looking, very interesting locations, and it was really good fun to interact with a mixed crew and blend the Irish and the Canarians and the people from mainland Spain as well. So it was a great experience. Creatively so stimulating to work in a place like that.
Okay, because it is like, I mean, the area is stunning, and I suppose like, or no, you don't know, you're never guaranteed good weather ever. Like, it can rain there, but and what time of year were you filming?
So we filmed from March until July.
Okay, so that gets very hot.
I was reckoning from December till February, and then we filmed March to July. And you can get rain. We had a couple of days of rain, but largely it was blue skies. And it's a good location. The thing you battle more than anything is the wind there, because the Canary Islands are very windy. So, but thankfully for me, because there's a murder mystery element to the show, the wind it obviously has a kind of spectral, kind of spooky quality, and it was really helpful in terms of telling the story. But it's a volcanic island as well, so they don't have a lot of white sand beaches. So there was a creative decision to make there in relation to how we render the scenes on the beach. Like, I don't particularly love the idea of sitting on black sand. It looks dirty to me. So there's 1 or 2 white sand beaches that we concentrated on for when we did need the beach work, because I wanted to make sure that people were able to compare us to the White Atlas.
Yeah. There's so many moving parts. There's so many characters. There's so many arcs that, kind of like have to be wrapped up. And then I presume, that's a lot of wrecking, a lot of prep, and you're abroad. So it's not, like, you can't ring people tomorrow and be like, well, we have pickups to do. Like, does something like that have a lot more pressure in terms of pre-production and, like ticking all the boxes and doing things? And does anything shift? Do you know, like, I mean, how tight is a budget? Because it looks such a high caliber, and it's all, what is it, a 5.5 hour flight away, and how do you get all the gear there? Like, do you rent it?
Yeah. Oh, it's a massive undertaking producer wise. And, thankfully, because Rob and Rebecca and the team are so good, I'm shielded from a lot of the kind of grisly horrors of scheduling a ensemble show that's 5 hour flight from Dublin, and the practicalities of crew and all that, and the vagaries of cast, and days that they can't shoot, and accommodating everybody. So I mean, they do a fantastic job that is also, for the record, highly creative. That's not just crunching numbers. There are creative editorial decisions that producers and production teams have to make that really end up on screen. So yeah, it's an extraordinarily complex undertaking, just as the writing of a show like that, where you have to weave in 10 or 11 storylines and have them bubbling away to the right level in the background. Just as that is complex, the execution of that is equally creative. So yeah, I mean, having a creative partnership with producers that sustains and supports you, and is like sympathetic to the way you want the story to go, is the most important thing in the world.
Oh, and at the time we're having this chat, I'm episode 3 in, and like I'm a tiny bit ahead because I got the scoop on it. Is there scope for a return? Is it limited? I mean, I just live in this world, so if anyone comes back for a renewal of vows, is there?
I don't know.
Are you allowed to say? Yeah.
No, I don't have any idea. I mean, I do have ideas, but I don't know what will happen with it. For now, I'm just really gratified to see it go out into the world, and it seems like people are really taking to it, and that's a good place to be right now. Yeah, if this goes out when episode 3 is airing on television, that's the halfway point. Maybe there'll be news by then, but I know it's going to be broadcast in a lot of other countries, although the news on that will come a little later too. So yeah, it looks good.
Fabulous. Okay, well, I'd certainly be hoping for that, because it's just such a strong drama. But it kind of takes me back to like good old days of drama. Like there's been a lot of substantial crime, but that kind of like meaty series. Like I used to love Raw back in the day, and it was great to see some familiar faces of that. Like you're just that kind of complex life of people living their day to day, and what runs underneath it, but there's such a polish to it, and it's so entertaining. Is there anything like we're watching the end, it looks incredible. Was there anything that was sort of an insurmountable or almost insurmountable thing, or things that you had to overcome or write around? Because there's so many spinning plates on something like this.
I mean, there always is, but no, there's nothing. There's no. There was no great obstacle. I mean, no, I think it kind of went the way I wanted. Like I was saying earlier, in relation to this stuff, when you get to the end of it, before it comes out in the world, you look back on it and you go, "Is that it? Is that what I was trying to do?" And with this one, I can really say yes. So no, I can't think of any stories that relate negatively to the way it was made in terms of obstacles that we couldn't overcome. It went very well.
Well, it certainly looks it. And in terms of now, like after kind of completing a project, when was this delivered? Like when were you finally, put the chair back, put the feet up, or is there an element of a lull there? Like, are you, you're on a high for so long that then there's like that moment of
No, I mean, it was, I think episode 6 was delivered from the post house in early January, so a couple of weeks ago. Wow. So yeah, it kind of rolls pretty much into the press and then the release of episode 1. So it's been a kind of continuous process pretty much, There's obviously the shooting, once you finish the shoot and you fly back home, that's an inevitable kind of drop in intensity, but then you go into the edit. So no, it's been quite continuous.
So what is on the plate now for something that has been that continuous and long, and you're sitting with those characters for such a long period of time? Do you like to do a palate cleanser in terms of something creatively, or take a break or anything like that to kind of give yourself a bit of a breather? Or is it, are you fueled by the success of something then?
Well, I'm always writing. The next thing I have is a romantic comedy that I've written with Stephen Merchant, which stars him and Cameron Diaz, and he's directing it, and it's shooting in New York in April, and it's an Amazon MGM production. So that is happening. I co-wrote the script with him, so I'll be over at some point on that. But writing-wise, I'm also always noodling away. So I have a couple of other things, but I have no idea what will happen with them. So yeah, the next few months will be a little bit more relaxed than the last perhaps 2 years have been, but then I'm sure it'll all ramp up again.
Oh God! Well, hopefully you can come back and talk about it then. Thank you so much for chatting with us. It is like
Thank you.
it is for me. It's been one of the strongest bits of Irish drama that we've produced for TV for a while.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, it's up there, and it's just totally recommended. And yeah, I'll be secretly hoping for a season 2. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And thank you so much for listening. So this episode has been made possible with the support of Screen Ireland. And make sure to rate and subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts.